Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. As ever, lots to talk about. And again, I'm just joined by your good selves this evening. Hope you're enjoying the summer. It's been a great summer, hasn't it? A lot warmer than average. I'm sure you've all been enjoying that. Right, where shall we start today? All sorts of things in the news. A few things that haven't really been in the news either. So do fire comments in. It'd be nice to have a chat as usual. So I've got my comments on the screen. There we go. In fact, let's have the comments. They'll come up automatically on the screen now. So where shall we start? I've got a little video clip from Nigel Farage's presentation of reforms, deportation policy for illegal immigrants. I'll save that till later, though. That's quite interesting. I'll save that till later. Let's start. Let's start here. Now, Neil Mackay, the Herald journalist, is not someone I agree with very often at all. In fact, he got in touch a few years ago and he said he was thinking about writing some sort of piece about the Scottish Family Party, a report about us. Now, I knew full well this would be a total hit piece. I mean, the final product would have just been, oh, you know, these are the bunch of evil bigots I knew they were. So I knew that's what it would be. But basically, there's no such thing as bad publicity, and getting some attention would have been great. So I said to him, yeah, I'm up for that. He wanted to do a really long interview with me. So I said, yeah, no problem. Then he was following us on social media, and we put something on social media. I think it might have just been something like straightforwardly pro-life or something. Then he got in touch and said, oh, no, if you say things like that, I can't even talk to you. So that was that. Anyway, so that's Neil Mackay. But anyway, a rare event happened today, and that I agree with him on a point. It says, a nation that makes a martyr of Lucy Connolly has lost its moral bearings. Right, good evening, everyone. Yeah, and I agree with him. Lucy Connolly, I'm sure you know, was the lady who said last summer, at the height of the unrest around migrant hotels or whatever, she encouraged people to burn down migrant hotels with the migrants in them, which is obviously an appalling thing to say, and as an incitement to violence. But the controversy around her case was the fact that she was sent to prison for 31 months, but she's out already, but that's just typical. You don't serve full terms. While there's other people who maybe said equally bad things or worse things, who are more from the left of politics, seem to get away with it. So the point about the injustice and the inconsistency is absolutely valid. But I don't like seeing Lucy Connolly like being interviewed by the Daily Telegraph. I don't like to see her being given a platform to say she was a political prisoner. I don't like the idea that Nigel Farage is going to argue her case and present her case to Donald Trump. So in other words, she has become a martyr for some people on the right of politics, and it's just totally wrong. Totally wrong. People should have the moral compass to be able to say she was mistreated, her sentence was unfair in comparison to other similar offences that other people committed. That's all perfectly valid. But surely we don't want the situation where you can be catapulted to become a public figure by saying something absolutely beyond the pale, something utterly appalling. So I agree. And I think some people on the right of politics need to have a think about that, about whether or not they want to make Lucy Connolly a figurehead of the movement, because I suggest she absolutely should not be. Right, Lord John. The USA is serious about freedom of speech issues arising from buffer zones. Good question. I think they are. I think they're also interested in that sort of right-wing immigration type issues as well, because I think there's a lot of freedom of speech issues there. I think like the Reform Party are interested in the anti-immigrant free speech. They're very interested in that. They are not interested in buffer zones, very definitely. I mean, they don't touch the issue. I don't think they've had any comments to look at it, because it will split their supporters. Because most of their supporters will be pro-abortion. A massive proportion of their female supporters will have had abortions and will be unrepentant about that. So their support isn't pro-life, basically. So they're not interested in the buffer zone thing. Is the American government, is J.D. Vance? He definitely is. He really is. I think he is pro-life, and he is very concerned about this issue. So it will be interesting. Let's imagine that there was a reform government after the next election. I was going to say, and imagine well, Trump won't be there by then in any case. But let's say someone like J.D. Vance was still very influential within the American government. There could be a real tension between the American government and a reform government in the UK over the issue. That would be very interesting. So yeah, is the USA serious? Yes. I'm not saying they particularly do much about it, apart from, I mean, there have been talk of like trade deals being influenced by this sort of thing. So maybe it will have practical implications. Maybe the United States government will flex its muscles over freedom of speech in the UK. Let's see. Okay, right. Let's go through the comments. Well, they've got them. Hello, Jack. Proportional representation voting is the most important thing for small parties and reform. Promise it. 72 Lib Dems, 2. So an election majority would not be necessary. Right. Yeah, I think I'll basically follow your drift there. Reform, of course, had a policy of introducing proportional representation. They said this system's not fair. We get, I don't know, 4 million votes and we only get 5 MPs. Totally unfair. We need proportional representation. It's a simple matter of justice. Until they're in the lead in the polls and the first past the post system is going to benefit them, then they drop their support for PR, which is a little unprincipled, you might say. So how could PR ever get through at the parliament? Because the elected government obviously has got in through first past the post system. Maybe some sort of coalition. If they need a coalition, let's say, well, it's not going to be with reform, but maybe the Lib Dems with some parties, whatever. So it is possible in the future we might move to proportional representation. I think we should have full PR, no thresholds or anything, no PR whatsoever. Sorry, total PR. In which case, I think I would be a member of the Scottish Parliament now, if that was the system we had. And yeah, it just is fair. So let's hope it comes along. Right, evening, everybody. Right, so let's, yes, that's Lucy Connolly. Should not be seen as a figurehead. And frankly, should not be someone that's been turned into a public figure to express her wider opinions. Because what precedent does that set? If you want to become a public figure, say something utterly beyond the pale, and you're well on your way. No thanks. So that could be an embarrassment to the right of politics, anti-immigration right of politics, if they celebrate and make Lucy Connolly a figurehead of their movement. So, right, moving swiftly on. This is interesting. Scottish bus firm tells passengers how to queue properly to stop selfish behaviour. Now, I go on the bus quite regularly. There's not very often big queues, but honestly, there's been some issues in Glasgow. This is the sort of thing you read, isn't it? It just makes it sort of a bit sad, isn't it, that this sort of thing becomes an issue. And where does it stem from? Now, the British in general have been renowned for having a culture of queuing, for queuing politely, taking your turn, forming a line, and no trying to push in or whatever. So there's been a very good cultural phenomenon, a good tradition in Britain, and it seems to have decayed. Why has it decayed? Is it because more people coming from other cultures where you don't do that? To be honest, I think that's probably a fairly minor factor, I would imagine. It may be a factor to some degree, but I imagine it would be quite a minor factor. The main factor, I think, would be the culture change within the British culture, from education and upwards. Just the idea that you behave with decorum and you don't just be selfish, you don't just look after yourself. You think about how this situation is going to resolve itself all smoothly and harmoniously. But that sort of culture has been eroded. And I think it's no one's fault apart from basically the people of Great Britain. Can it be restored? I mean, do you want lessons in school about queuing? I would say, no, we don't want lessons, but you do absolutely insist on queuing in an orderly manner in many situations at school. Now, generations ago, some teachers would have the class would queue up before they came into the classroom, or they'd have to form an orderly queue before going into the dining room. I think probably in most schools, that's gone. That's gone. If there's some sort of constriction to get through it, queuing up to get into the dining hall, I would imagine a scrum is the more common formation that comes about in that situation. So I think it's something well worth making an effort to preserve. I think education is one thing. I mean, other thing is this something the police should involve themselves in, intervene in? I suspect not. I guess it's for everyone to try and set a good example, parents with their children as well. Now, I was slightly amused. This is not really a serious point, but I was slightly amused that this Scottish bus firm, first, they were complaining about like the breakdown of traditional values there. And then they had a picture of one of their bus drivers. But is there any contradiction there? No, that's not a serious point at all. I mean, a man with in my humble opinion, ludicrous hairstyle might be just as good a cure as anybody else. So what else have we got? Okay, the Scottish Youth Parliament. I mean, this is still rumbling on in the background. The Scottish Youth Parliament and the Scottish Children's Parliament, government-funded things. They're full of people from the third sector, the sort of people who are very closely related with the government, work for government-funded organisations. Colin Morrison, the sex education man, he's involved in either the Youth Parliament or the Children's Parliament. I think there have been scandals of a inappropriate relationship nature around both of them, which I think is quite concerning. Anyway, what these organizations do, they're created by the government. And the idea is you get a few impressionable young people or children, and you basically surround them, soak them, marinate them in the government's ideology and philosophy. And then you ask them what they think. What would they like to do? And particularly with the Children's Parliament, the sessions are facilitated by adults. And adults basically lead them by the nose. So they say what the government wants them to say. The Scottish Youth Parliament's not much different, really. The same sort of idea. So the Scottish Youth Parliament, we're launching our brand new manifesto at the next sitting on Saturday, the 6th of September. So they've got a manifesto. The youth of Scotland have spoken. And this is what they are saying. The 5 big themes for change: accessible, equitable, and inclusive education. Right. I mean, do you believe that? If you ask your children, ask the young people in your home what their priorities are, see if they line up with these. I guarantee they've got nothing to do with them whatsoever. They're just parroting government speak. I think most children in school, if you say, what needs improving about education, they might say, we'd like a maths teacher, because we haven't had one for 2 years. Or they might say things like, lessons are chaos. There's rampant bullying. No one does anything about it. Pupils get away with all sorts of things. That'll be the sort of things you'd hear from real young people, but not these ones. Right? They want safe and supportive communities. I mean, what sort of 15-year-old said, if we say to them, right, what's important for you? Oh, safe and supportive communities. It's not just the ideas straight from the government, the language is straight from the government as well. A sustainable and renewable society. Oh, come on. A fairer and just Scotland. I mean, this could be a speech by Nicola Sturgeon here. Empowering young people to claim their rights. Well, I never. Who'd have thought it? So the young people are asking for empowerment to claim their rights. What does the government obsess about? Children's rights. So surprise, surprise, the children are asking for exactly what the government's always saying it wants to give them. Now, I think this is, it's abusing children and young people. Now, abuse is a dramatic word. Let's say misusing them. It's misusing them. It's using them as the government uses these children and young people as a means to their own end, rather than respecting them as independent individuals. And I'd imagine a lot of these people, when they grow older, they will look back and they'll say, I'm not happy with what happened there. I was used. They took me along to that. They led me by the nose. We were manipulated into saying what they wanted us to say. And then they used that as if to say, look at us, the SNP, we're doing what the youths want. That's great, isn't it? So there's a very significant moral questions to ask around the Youth Parliament. But will they get asked? Not until the Scottish Family Party is in the Parliament. Well, let's hope for next year. So let's... that's a picture of the Youth Parliament, some of them in action, having a great time. I would guarantee, I don't know that unless they have a defined 50-50 gender split, I would bet my house that there's more girls than boys in it. Guaranteed. I was looking at a document the other day about Scotland's new behavior policy. I'm going to make a video about it. And on the front cover, it had a montage, a collage of photographs of pupils in school. Substantial majority of them are girls. Everything the Scottish government publishes to do with education or young people, it's majority girls in the pictures. So let us move on. There's another interesting little snippet. Now, the Humanist Society of Scotland, they don't really hear that much of them these days. I've done a few debates with representatives from the Humanist Society of Scotland. Their philosophy, I would say, is basically, well, they don't really have a philosophy. Their philosophy is to disagree with anything religious. Anything a religious person does or says, they want to try and say the opposite. And they sometimes want to do things that are good, but it seems like the only reason they want to do them is to show that they can do them without being religious. So I've actually contacted them quite recently saying, how about a debate? Would you go for a debate? Just like in the olden days. No reply. No reply. I wonder why that is. Anyway, so I was quite intrigued to see this post here. It says, often people say, I've been to 2 or 3 counsellors and they all told me to go back to church. Hang on. Where on earth is this report from? Can you imagine in Scotland, if you picked a counsellor and they said to you, well, I think you should go back to church. Really? I mean, that's virtually impossible that you'd find that from a secular counsellor. In other words, a mainstream counsellor through the NHS or whatever, or you just find someone online, a private counsellor. Right, so don't believe it. One person told me, and I quote, my counsellor says I'm depressed because I'm an atheist. Well, the evidence might point in that direction to some degree. Right, could you imagine a counsellor saying that? I mean, this is a real problem the Humanist Society is trying to get to grips with. In other words, there's a whole swathes of counsellors in Scotland who are like biased in favour of religion and sort of discriminate against and criticise non-religious clients. I mean, does anyone really believe that that's the case? Of course not. Right, we get to the next paragraph. We find these stories are from America. Okay, so I don't particularly believe them, but anyway. So raised in US evangelism. That doesn't make sense. They mean evangelicalism. Evangelism is preaching of the Christian message to people who are not Christians. Evangelicalism is a theological stream within Christianity. Anyway, so he's formed a recovering from religion group, etc., etc. And they're having a tour in Britain, coming to Glasgow and Edinburgh on the 12th to 13th of October. Now, humanists, of course, will make it their business to pitch up at that and tell stories of how they've been scarred and wounded by religious upbringings. But yeah, I've seen this Humanist Society maybe a little bit more in the last few weeks. They seem to have been popping up a little bit more. Would I like them to be more in the press? Well, maybe yes, because I think they tend to embarrass themselves because it's so blatantly obvious that they haven't got any principle apart from being anti-religious. And I would love to debate one of them. Again, I did say a few debates, some of them quite substantial events, some of them at Edinburgh University, etc. So Humanist Society Scotland, if anyone's watching, that is very unlikely, we'd be up for a debate again, like in the olden days. There's a few MSPs, by the way, who align themselves quite closely with the Humanist Society of Scotland. And the Humanist Society does have significant interaction with the Parliament. So, right, talking about interaction with the Parliament. Inclusion Scotland, Disabled People's Organisation. Classed as a charity, of course. Inclusion Scotland, who are they funded by? Well, there's only one funder shown on the website, and the one funder is the Scottish Government. So Inclusion Scotland, funded by the Scottish Government, virtually entirely. Maybe someone gives them a tiny bit of money here and there, but basically it's a government-funded organisation. So it's not really a charity, it's an arm's-length government body. Right, why am I talking about this? This is why I think it's quite significant. Change happens when we step up and demand it. Join the march for all of us. Edinburgh, 25th of October, Scotland demands better. This is a big, I don't know, sort of left-wing, third sector, trade unions type march. I don't know much about it, but it seems like it's going to be quite a big event in Edinburgh. And they're demanding better of the government. Okay, So the Scottish government is taking your taxes, giving them to Inclusion Scotland, and then get people to march along, I don't know, Princes Street in Edinburgh in order to demand of that same government that they do things better. So what a total waste of money. But what does it serve? I think it serves that they'll demand things, and then they'll demand things that the Scottish government wants to do, and then they will do them. This is a bit like the previous one, isn't it? I was saying about the youth parliament. Same sort of idea. The Scottish government spending money through an organisation that then says things that the government wants them to say, but it gets reported in the media as though this is some sort of an independent body expressing an opinion, when it absolutely is not. So, right. Okay, I'm just trying to look at the comments, but I can't understand the last one. Yeah, here we go. Right, okay. Right, Mr. Mellon, you comment about the girl in Dundee, two-bladed weapons. I'm not familiar with that story. So if you want to tell us a bit more about it, I would be very interested. Right, on the subject of weapons, let's have a look at this. Weapons seized in Scottish schools, 2024. Police confiscated 248 weapons, primarily knives, from pupils, averaging more than one per day. Glasgow, Aberdeenshire, Edinburgh led the statistics. 248 weapons, mainly knives, confiscated by the police. I mean, who knows what teachers do as well, but by the police. So 248 times the police have been into a school to take a knife or weapon from a pupil. That is pretty concerning, isn't it? I keep saying this in the live stream and elsewhere. These things that go on in schools, it's not isolated incidents. It's not like the one time it happens in the whole of Scotland in 5 years and it makes the newspaper. This is routine, ongoing stuff. So moving on from that, so the statistics came out relatively recently for the home education or homeschooling in Scotland, and it showed a pretty dramatic growth. So the number of children being homeschooled in Scotland rose from 2,222 to 2,851, and 28% increase. This represents a 79% jump since 2021-2022. Now, those statistics are pretty dubious because you only have to register children as being home educated if they've been in school. So if a child goes to school for a year, then the parents think, whoa, we're not very happy with this, we're going to home educate. Then that child will be on a home education register maintained by the council. Okay, so that, I would imagine that's where these statistics come from. But the parents who say, no, we're not going to have our child going near the state schools, we know what goes on in there, so we're going to home educate, or for whatever other reason, I think they will not be in the statistics. So I think there'll be at least as much growth with those ones as well. So these are very, very dramatic underestimates. So we're looking at the growth in a 3-year period. So Dumfries and Galloway, 53 to 218. Glasgow, 88 to 258. 549 to 260. Or Guyland Butte, 15 to 73. Okay, so that's pretty dramatic. So some research has been done. Parents cite escalating classroom violence. Surprise, surprise. Declining educational standards. The parents are absolutely right. Inadequate support for children with additional support needs. Now, that's a more tricky one. I think now a cynical politician at this point would say, oh, yes, we'd supply more, we'd spend more, we'd get more assistance in, we'd have more special needs teachers, we'd just provide more and more individualized, personalized attention. But maybe that's just unaffordable. Maybe it's unaffordable. Maybe a culture is developed of overdiagnosing. And what can tend to happen with parents is once the child is given a diagnosis, and then the educational psychologist might say, it would help this child if they were taught in this way or that way, or sat at the front, or had whatever, all sorts of special things, or needs extra support from an adult with them. And the school might say, well, we just can't provide that. It's too much. We've got too many kids with too many special demands. We can't meet all these needs. And the danger is then the parents say, yeah, that's right, we're not happy. The needs of our child are not being met. Now, in some cases, that might be true. In some cases, I suspect it might be that the expectations are unrealistic and the child's overdiagnosed. And it would be better if they didn't have this diagnosis, weren't regarded as special needs, leave it up to the teacher. The teacher will get on with trying to sort things out, maybe get a classroom assistant in or whatever. So, yeah, I can see where the problem is. That it says teachers are increasingly subjected to verbal and physical abuse, often lack effective disciplinary tools. Okay, well, we all know about that, don't we? So Lindsay Patterson, professor, I think he's emeritus professor now of education, who's usually very good on things. He said, education policy experts suggest frustration with school quality, not ideology, drives parents to opt for home education. So that's interesting, isn't it? Because I would have tended to thought the leading reason is they don't want that sex education. They don't want their kids telling they can change gender. It's that sort of thing that parents really don't want to have to put their children with. And I think the ones I meet in any case, that's a very significant factor, if not the number one factor. But this seems to be suggesting people more broadly, rather than people with, Christian or Muslim values or whatever, people more broadly are looking at the violence, the educational standards, and are opting out for that reason, which is interesting. Maybe, just maybe, the children we're looking at here in this cohort is ones who went to school and were then withdrawn. So maybe that tends to be parents who are thinking school, the state school and its ideology could be great, then find that it's like a punch-up every day and they withdraw the children from it. So maybe these home educators are less likely to be the ones with the ideological differences. Maybe the ones with the ideological objections are more likely to not send their children to school in the first place. Very possibly. Made that up as I went along, but I think that sounds quite plausible. Right. Professor Patterson also said, while academically advantaged students may perform better when home schools, there's a risk of widening education and social inequality. Homeschoolers might miss out on broad curricula, and oversight in Scotland remains less stringent, raising concerns about academic rigor and safeguarding. Right, you can see what they're building up to there, aren't they? There's a real danger. These children being home educated, the state needs to get more involved. We need to be inspecting, checking up, making sure this education is the way we want it. And then they'll start turning the screw ideologically in order to pressurize parents into teaching what the state wants them to teach. A lot of parents will say, well, we're not doing that. So the state would then say, well, you can't educate your own children then. And I mean, this is the sort of way things are drifting. You can see that they make it sound like home education really dangerous. I mean, how does school go? How is school going? For a huge number of children in Scotland, school is traumatic. They're bullied, they're surrounded by bad behavior, frazzled teachers, an undemanding curriculum, a culture among the pupils that's very harmful, damaging to children, etc. But as far as the state's concerned, they don't need to address concerns about what their schools are doing to children, but they're hyper-vigilant on the dangers of home education. That's where their attention is. Right. Okay. Someone says I'm frozen. If I'm frozen, someone else put a comment in. Let's see. Right, I made this image during the week. I actually read through the Scottish government's new behaviour policy. I'm going to make a video of it later. So I made this cartoon for a bit of fun. And the teacher there is saying, if you punch me again, you won't get away with it. I will provide you with a developmentally appropriate list of actions to take when frustrated in the future. The laminated bullet points will remind you and support you to seek help and follow an agreed and rehearsed process. If that doesn't work, we'll write a risk assessment for you. I'm serious. What a joke. I get away with everything. And the teacher's words there, they're pretty well a direct quote from the Scottish Government's behaviour plan. And it's the actions you could take when faced with violence, a violent pupil. I mean, it is totally, what can you say? They basically lost the plot. It's so dominated by progressive ideology, they completely reject the idea of punishment in any way, shape, or form, and so disciplines fall into bits. But what happened in this case, which is quite interesting, the teachers said to the government, basically, we've got real problems here, pupils behaving very badly. We want to be able to punish them. That's what they were thinking. We want to be able to punish naughty pupils. But of course, being Scotland, you can't use the word punish, can you? Because that's very unenlightened. People wouldn't like that. Your career's over if you use the word punish. So instead, the teachers said, can we use consequences? And the government said, of course you can. We'll write you a whole new document about the consequences you can use. And what are the consequences? Well, they're not punishments. It's have a chat. Miss a lesson instead of going to it, having a laminated list of things to do instead of punching the teacher, this sort of thing. So the problem has arisen because the teachers are too squeamish to say, we want to be able to punish naughty children. And until they say that, the government will be able to fob them off and will remain in the problem that we are in. Okay, let's keep going. One last thing on this topic. How do the government respond? The only way it knows how, really. It says we've spent lots of money on it. So they spent £1 billion on special needs provision in schools. £1 billion. The Scottish government's annual budget is about, isn't that 40 or 50 billion pounds? So we're talking a couple of percent of the nation's annual budget. I think £1 billion is not far off Police Scotland's annual budget. This is a massive sum of money being spent on this. Is it working? No. And they've produced an action plan aimed at reducing violence. They're always producing action plans, and they always say the same thing, and they maintain the problem. Right, moving on. I've mentioned this a couple of times over recent months, but things are really shifting with regard to same-sex marriage. But the likes of Nigel Farage like to say, oh, yes, it's a settled issue here. I was against it at the time, but, it's a settled issue. We're all cool with it now, and we've moved on. But there's a lot of possibilities where they haven't moved on, including the United States of America, where a significant number of states are looking at it again. Currently, states are not allowed to legislate because it was fixed by a federal law, but it's been challenged in the Supreme Court. The challenge is underway. And I think there's a fair chance, I'm no legal expert, but there's a fair chance that, like Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court will say, no, actually, it's up to states to legislate as they wish. And then all the states that were forced into it will reject it. Same-sex marriage will be finished in those states. Our policy is opposed to same-sex marriage. Why is that? Well, we think the ideal of the mum and dad bringing up their own children is the ideal we want to encourage and maximize, and through marriage as well. Whereas same-sex marriage obviously does not meet that ideal, so it dilutes it and undermines the ideal of the married mum and dad bringing up their own children. The other thing with same-sex marriage as well is it's a national endorsement on homosexual relationships, and it amounts to an equal treatment of homosexual relationships, whereas in actual fact, the outcomes associated with homosexual relationships are far, far less positive than for heterosexual relationships. Homosexual relationships tend to lead to very significant problems for people who enter into them. And so equalizing them, giving them equal status with heterosexual relationships is unwise, and I would say is misleading to the population as well, who really need to know the truth about these things. Right, very important announcement of annual conference. Be there in Glasgow again, Saturday, the 8th of November. Our conference last couple of years, we just did an afternoon, but we're going back to a full day. So we've got a greater lineup of speakers for that. Woodlands Road in Glasgow, so West End of Glasgow, only £15, including lunch and so drinks reception after the conference as well. And then later in the evening, there is a meal which you can book separately from the conference, and that will be a local restaurant. So it would be great to see you there. Probably a lot of you have been regulars at our conferences, but do come along. We've got some fresh faces speaking as well. It's going to be good. So hope to see you there. Tickets are available. The newsletter that went out today, I've got ticket information, but it'll be posted online very soon as well. Right, this was prompted by an article, I think it was in the Express today. Jeremy Corbyn's party, which hasn't got a name yet, your party, the reports are that they're planning to stand candidates in the Holyrood elections next year. Is that going to hit our vote? Surely not by anyone who understands anything about politics, because the values of your party, Corbyn's party, will be like the Greens. It will be a pretty hard left, well, very hard left party. I would suggest anti-Semitic, hyper-progressive. So basically the opposite of the social conservatism of the Scottish Family Party. So they're going to be standing. But when they stand, it's not really polling. It's not proper electoral polling, but research has indicated that they'll have a significant amount of support in Scotland. I suppose our hope can be they'll split the vote with the Greens, and they might end up with, well, they're not going to end up with no MSPs between them, but it might hit the number of Green MSPs. But what happens there is people with a hard left, hyper-progressive set of values, they'll vote for the Greens or Jeremy Corbyn's party, and they'll have MSPs to represent them. Right, voters who are more like soft left, progressive voters, so that they're very much not aligned with the family party policies, they're quite hostile to them. People like that, they'll vote for Labour, the SNP, or the Lib Dems, and they will have lots of MSPs in the Parliament to represent them. People who are centre-right, not quite so progressive, well, very unionist maybe, they will probably vote Conservative, and the Conservative will have some MSPs. So those people will be represented in the Parliament as well. Now, people who are more right-wing, culturally conservative, not socially conservative, not pro-life, anything like that. So culturally conservative, so anti-immigration types, they will vote for reform, and they will be represented in the Parliament by reform MSPs. Now, traditionally, for many years in Scotland, people who are socially conservative, pro-life, traditional values, family values, this sort of our perspective, who do they vote for? Well, they vote for any of the other parties, and then they're not represented in the Parliament. So what we're asking is for people who share our values to vote for us, obviously, and then they will also be represented in the Parliament by Scottish Family Party MSPs. If everyone who agrees with us, with our policies, votes for us, we'll have MSPs in the Parliament. It's as simple as that. So next year is the big year. Let's hope that happens. Just a little reminder about this. I've been doing a bit of research in this area, the state of the United Kingdom's public finances. I mean, it really is dire. I think last month we went another £21 billion into debt. At the moment, UK national debt is racking up at £5,000 every second, £428 million per day. Now, if you go to Jeremy Corbyn's party, he'll say there's nothing to worry about. Don't worry, just keep spending. It's going to work out one way or another. But whatever you would like the government to be spending, if you would like more funding for the NHS, if you would like more generous benefits, if you would like more government action to help people in poverty, if you would like those things, they've got to be paid for. And the United Kingdom is getting towards the point where it really doesn't matter. The important question is not what you'd like to do. The important question is there going to be any money to do anything? Because the public finances are in a terrible, terrible state. We're spending more on debt interest than defence. So I saw one of the aircraft carriers over in Rosyth the other day. I was going over the bridge. So a couple of aircraft carriers, the whole Royal Navy, the whole Royal Air Force, the whole Army. You know, think of that. I mean, huge. All that expense, we spend more than that on debt interest. And the debt is just getting higher and higher and higher. And the bond interest rates, bond yields are going up. In other words, when the government wants to borrow more money, or when it has to pay back money that is borrowed on a fixed term, then one of the ways they do this is by selling bonds. And people will only buy the bonds if they've got sufficient interest rate, and the interest rate that the market demands is going up and up because the market's becoming a little bit more twitchy about whether the United Kingdom can actually pay back these bonds, such as the state of our public finances. Whose fault is it? Well, Labour and the Conservatives and the SNP and the Lib Dems. I mean, this has been going on for decades. And also blame has to be laid also with the electorate, because they've kept voted for parties that were irresponsible. And the electorate can be bought with promises of spending, but it's been virtually impossible to get elected on the basis of cutting spending and actually getting a grip and saving the country from economic calamity. So we'll see how that's going. But it's very, very concerning. We're entering the end game. I mean, in a sense, Labour's been unlucky. Like in the game of Pass the Parcel, it looks like the music's going to stop while the parcel's in their lap. But you can sympathise them in a sense. But on the other hand, we don't sympathise with them because their ideology is to carry on exactly the same thing. Now, Reform talk about sorting out these issues, but on the other hand, they're pretty liberal with throwing promises around as well, where they think it's going to be popular. So, are Reform to the answer? Not sure. Not sure. Another little reminder: Sunday, isn't it? Sunday, the 14th of September. We've got social in Aberdeen, and it is actually, I think that picture is actually where it is. It's the Wetherspoons there by Castlegate. It's 8 p.m. We're meeting on Sunday, the 14th of September. So come along if you can. It'd be nice to see you. We thought about just going and doing some sort of pro-life activity in the square there again to see if all hell broke loose again. We decided not to in the end. We'll maybe do some of those things later on in the year. Maybe do the lights when things get a bit darker again. But I quite like this. This was an entertaining little snippet. So the bottom there, it's from a school department. It's in Canada or America. And you can see there, when given the choice between being right and being kind, choose kind. I mean, what a vacuous nonsense that is. Anyway, I quite like the response. The respondent said, this is groupthink. And she rephrased it. She said, when given the choice between being right and being kind, tell the adult to stop emotionally manipulating you. Yep. As if there's a tension between being right and being kind. You can imagine the sort of thinking behind it. How would that translate into transgender things? Okay, you may think Fred's not really a girl, but being right's not important. Being kind's the important thing. So it's kinder to say to Fred, oh yes, we think you're a girl after all. But again, this sort of ethos, this sort of fuzzy, mushy, fluffy thinking, the sort of platitudes, it's very prevalent in schools in Scotland as well. And I think in a lot of cases, this sort of thing is the best the schools have got to offer to young people, is these very empty phrases. This is a bit of a bigger story. Jeremy Balfour has resigned from the Scottish Conservative Party. Jeremy Balfour was elected in 2016 as a list MSP, Edinburgh and Lothians, I think. I understand that what happened was that the Conservatives had some sort of process to decide the order of people on the list. And I think Jeremy Balfour was maybe fourth. But in the system, he was tied. He got the same number of votes as the person who ended up in fifth. So the two of them tied, joint fourth place. So they needed to decide. And frankly, when they were going through this process, they thought it doesn't really matter. We're never going to get 4 people elected. I mean, we'll be lucky if we get 3 elected. We're never going to get 4. So who cares? So basically, they cut a pack of cards to determine who was going to be fourth on the list and who was going to be fifth. And Jeremy Balfour won the card cut. So he was fourth on the list. And the Conservatives did much better than expected. So he got elected. So it basically became an MSP through a flip of the coin, more or less, figuratively speaking, which was quite interesting. Jeremy Balfour's background, I think, did he work for the Evangelical? He's worked for a Christian organization, maybe the Evangelical Alliance. I think he was a Baptist church leader of some description as well. So he came very much with evangelical Christian credentials. I think he would still profess that type of faith. Has he spoken out in the Parliament on these sort of issues? Has he been a pro-life voice? Has he challenged LGBT inclusive education? These sort of things? The answer is basically no. No, I mean, virtually zero. Virtually zero. As Christian MSPs do, he's very prominent on the Christian scene. He'll pop up at events and host events in the Parliament, all this sort of thing. But when it comes to actually saying anything that might be a little bit unpopular, then nowhere to be seen. Now, I did an event with Jeremy Balfour years ago now, just after the family party started. It was called Christians in Politics, and we had a panel discussion. And I remember Jeremy Balfour said, "You can't be a prophet and a politician." So Jeremy Balfour can't complain now when I say he has not been a prophet at all. But I mean, why would you say that? You can't be a prophet and a politician. That's like saying you've given up before you start. Like, it's like saying, I am not going to challenge moral evils that I encounter because I'm a politician. Wow. That is just totally at the other end of the spectrum from what we believe in the Scottish Family Party. Anyway, so he's going to sit as an independent MSP into the next election. To be honest, the next election, he was going to lose his seat in any case. So he was, yeah. If it looked like he was going to win his seat, would he be leaving the Conservative Party? Very possibly not. It's interesting to see where people's loyalty really lies when their seats are stable, or when there's no hope anymore, or when they think the best hope is in another party. Anyway, so that's Jeremy Balfour. So we wish him well. I've never had a proper chat with him. I've met him a few times, but I don't really know him. But we wish him well. But in terms of being a prophetic voice in the Parliament, he has not been that at all. So just to go through the other sort of evangelical Christian MSPs, John Mason kicked out of the SNP, standing down. Jeremy Balfour, standing down. Murdo Fraser has declared he's pro-choice. He might get re-elected. He declares himself pro-choice, but he's still a Christian celebrity. He still appears at Christian events. Christian organizations still invite him and put him on a pedestal, if you like. I mean, what you need to say for these organizations to say, well, no, actually, you're not aligned with our values. And if you say you're pro-abortion, I mean, what could be worse than that from a Christian campaigning organization's point of view? Anyway, Kate Forbes, you know her story. I mean, she's standing down. Have I missed one? Oh, no, it's just the four, isn't it? Yeah, just the four. Gordon Lyndhurst's already gone. He was deselected at the last election. Right, so let's have a look at a few comments here. Right, let's have a look at that. Right, that's quite a mouthful, that name. And I think in votes and voting really a facade. I think we're told once the relevant party is chosen by our benign overlords. I don't believe that. I think the electoral process is real. I believe that the parties generally compete with each other, and in many cases they detest each other. Are the parties influenced by supranational bodies? Yes, I think they are, but not all of them. They don't have to be. Some parties choose to follow, like World Economic Forum, etc. They choose to follow these trends, but they don't have to. Partly the reason that the mainstream parties tend to mirror each other is they're all chasing public opinion. They've all got their research, they've all got their focus groups or whatever, and they're trying to work out how to get the biggest chunk of public opinion. So they're all going to tend to be pulled towards the center of gravity of public opinion, which is why they might sometimes seem to be quite uniform. So what else have we got? Any of that? Okay. Right, David, growth. This is back to the economic issue, the public finances, growth, generational, return capital flight from abroad as an investment. Yeah, they're all very important issues. A lot of people, of course, work in Britain, and most of what they earn is sent to another country. And that's their whole raison d'etre for being here. They live very simply, maybe do a not particularly highly paid job, but when that money is translated into currency of a poorer country, it becomes a lot. So that's an effective thing for them to do. But it's not great for the UK economy, people earning money and just leaving the country immediately. That's not really ideal. Yeah, I would say we're heading towards where the decline might not be that managed. It might be a bit unmanaged, a bit out of control. Right. Now, someone said something like this last week, didn't they? Someone in the comments said they'd been reading about artificial wombs, which I was aware that there was research going on, but then I saw this on the internet. China developing world's first humanoid pregnancy robot with artificial womb designed to carry fetus for 10 months and give birth. Now, what the Chinese government will be thinking here, I would guess, is that we need more kids, and women, natural families seem a bit reluctant to have them. Maybe they'd have more if we could take away the discomfort and inconvenience of pregnancy. So if they could say to a couple, we'll incentivize you to have more kids. So have another kid. You don't need to be pregnant. You can use this way. How will this work out? I suspect it will work out very badly, because I think the process of human development is meant to be in the womb within the mother, and that there's a degree of bonding and communication that takes place at that time. So very much against it. But let's see what happens with that one. So you can see China's point of view. I think the Chinese government basically quite amoral. They don't have the sort of moral foundation that we have in this country, or moral tradition in the background. So for them, it's just a matter of pragmatism. Is this a policy that can help reverse demographic decline? And they'll think, yes, it is. And they might even start like getting donors, sperm and egg donors, and just producing babies by the government. So they won't necessarily be associated with any parents brought up in some sort of state. And there's Brave New World stuff, isn't it? I mean, that's where they're potentially heading with this. How awful. Yes, indeed. This was just look at the bottom here. So this is common or garden supermarket food items with anti-theft tags on them. So it sets off an alarm when you take them out without paying for them. How about that? So a couple of pints of milk needs a tag on it to make sure people don't steal it. A block of cheese needs a tag on it to make sure it's not stolen. That is not a good sign, is it? That's not a good sign. How many schools in Scotland in the last year have done an assembly on don't steal things? I would guess the answer is 0, because they're busy with equality, diversion and inclusion and bullying and racism and sexism and Andrew Tate and whatever. Don't steal things doesn't really get a look in. The same as like don't tell lies doesn't get a look in. I used to think this with teachers. You'd hear senior staff taking assemblies, head teachers, etc. And you think, well, why do you ever do an assembly about don't tell lies? And then later on you realize why not, because they don't actually hold to that principle. They do tell lies. But they're very happy to talk about racism and sexism and climate change and all the sort of standard stuff you'd get in an assembly. There. Babies need mothers growing in the womb. This is so wrong. Absolutely, absolutely agree. It's an interesting picture you've got there. What you call the group of lions? A pride of lions, looking very proud in their Union Jacks there in the street. I think this is the last story. Now, I said that this MSP suspended from Scottish Labour over indecent image charge. I think this gentleman has been arrested over indecent images of children, I understand, found on laptop or whatever. I don't know the technical details. Now this case has not come to a conclusion, so let's not jump to conclusions. But the thing that I think is concerning with this is just what is going on. We have this constant string of politicians involved in basically sexual perversion and scandal, and it's not a natural proportion. So what's going on here? This is our tweet about it. We need to wait for the verdict in this case, but the number of cases of sexual misconduct among elected politicians is shocking, a national disgrace. What attracts such people to the main parties, or how does elected office lead people into such activities? Is it reaching the point where we need a public inquiry? Well, I think it is. I think it is. It is absolutely epidemic. I think how many MSPs there are, 129. If you're in an organization with 129 members of staff, how often would you expect this sort of issue to come up? Pretty rare, wouldn't it? But it just comes up again and again and again. So is it that such people are attracted to the parties? I don't know. Or does elected office lead people into them? Is it the stress? Is it the opportunities? Is it the culture? Do they feel untouchable? I really don't know. So the fact that I don't know, and I don't think anyone else does either, means that maybe an inquiry would be helpful. And also, are these things that people know about? I mean, is this, what was his name again? His name is, Colin Smith. So Colin Smith's colleagues, if this all came out and there was a big scandal, this is what he was doing, would his colleagues be saying, well, we sort of knew he was, there's something a bit odd there. We used to joke about it. Would it be one of those cases where people were aware of disturbing behavior or attitudes from this person, but they didn't do anything? I don't know. So I think it is important to know, and the state should try and do something about it. Right, there's only I've got my video about Nigel Farage's immigration thing, but we're just about out of time, so I'll save that for next week, even though it is in the title. I'll tell you which bit of Nigel Farage's speech. Someone asked him at the end, they said, you've got this deportation plan. They said the Church of England bishops will all oppose it, and yet you say you defend Judeo-Christian values. And Nigel Farage basically didn't have an answer. He waffled for long enough that people forgot what the question was, and he didn't begin to answer it. Now, I thought I could answer that question. I'll do that next week. I'll save it till next week. But one last little thing to round off this evening. Right, this is back in the midst of time, back to the year 2000. That's the BBC News website as it looked then. Looks pretty terrible, doesn't it? And this was Section 28, which prevented the promotion of homosexuality in schools. And the campaign was underway. The moves were underway by the government to repeal it so that homosexuality could be promoted in schools. Brian Souter in particular opposed it. Big controversy in Scotland. Right, that's the introduction. Now let's look at this. One of the politicians at the time said this. Brian Souter personally financed a national referendum on the issue. So a postal vote was sent to everyone in Scotland, and the votes were counted, and a vast majority of people said we want to keep this section of the law which prevents the promotion of homosexuality in schools. A lot of people boycotted it. So the Scottish government said, it's not valid because so many people boycotted it. But actually, it was a good indication of public opinion. Anyway, this politician said, the ballot confirms what we already knew, that many people are concerned about the repeal of Section 2A. We believe that the value of marriage should be clearly referred to in the guidelines without denigrating other relationships or children brought up in other kinds of relationships. Early publication of the revised guidance is now a priority and is needed to bring this issue to a close. Right, we believe that the value of marriage should be clearly referred to in the guidelines. Right, who would that be? Who in the Scottish Parliament would be? This is before same-sex marriage, by the way. This is talking about man-woman marriage, real marriage. So who is it that's speaking so powerfully about the value of marriage has to be included in these guidelines? And any guesses? Any guesses? Put in which member of the Scottish Parliament you think would be saying, defending the value of marriage, promoting marriage, saying marriage has to be included in this? Well, let's have some guesses. Just while I'm waiting for the guesses to come up. All right, Mr. Mellon. Yes, the BBC seems to have a similar issue as well. We don't seem to be getting any guesses. No guesses. Shall I tell you who it is then? It is Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon said that. Does Nicola Sturgeon believe in the value of marriage? Promoting it in schools? Absolutely not. Not remotely. I thought it's just an interesting illustration to show it's not that Nicola Sturgeon's views changed over time. It's just a lot of politicians will just say what's fashionable. So in the year 2000, it suited Nicola Sturgeon to be saying, oh, we very much value marriage between a man and a woman. We really need to include that in our guidance for schools. Did she believe it at the time? No. Why did she say it? Because she thought that was the sensible thing to say. Would she say that now? Not on your life. Not on your life. So no principles. Oh, well, I'll take that back. Nicola Sturgeon has got principles, but one of them isn't that you're honest about your principles. You can lie about them when you need to for political purposes, but she does have a principle. I mean, she's a feminist, LGBT activist, etc. Gordon Brown, that was a more sensible guess than the right answer, but that was Nicola Sturgeon. Right, our hour is gone. Thank you very much for your comments and for watching. There will be a live stream next week. I'm actually out of Scotland, but we will still have a live stream one way or another, so do join us there. And the big thing to remind you of, Scottish Family Party Conference, 8th of November in Glasgow. Get your tickets. They'll be on social media very soon, or you'll have had the newsletter or a member's email, and get your tickets. And if you can stay for the dinner after it, that would be better still. Right, thanks everyone, and see you next week. Good night.